Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? We're here with a very, very special guest, actually, two very, very special guests. We've got none other than the tutorial shooter himself.
Thanks, sir.
Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing?
Alaikum assalam, bro.
I mean, I have to say, I've now met him in person, and we've been speaking for some time on WhatsApp, and his enthusiasm, alhamdulillah, when it comes to Islam and knowing and knowledge and practice, seeing you in the masjid and stuff like that is fantastic. And someone else who's a revert and an important figure in Islamic dawah scene is Hamza Zortzis himself. How you doing, bro? You okay? MashaAllah. Well, I'm happy to, it's a pleasure and honour to be with both of you. There's a lot to talk about, to be honest with you. Now it's the hot topic. Obviously, you're very close with Andrew Tate. We've both been barraged by the media and the journalists and the press and stuff like that about him. So-called manosphere, jargons and stuff are being thrown around in relation to all three of us, actually. We've all been kind of labelled as these kind of things. So there's a lot to talk about. But I think what I want to start with you is I'll speak about a little bit about your conversion.
Okay.
Because it was going around in WhatsApp how you converted. But, I really touched all of us, actually, because we went to some of our groups and we said this is the way he articulated it was really powerful. So can you just, for those who haven't heard it before, what brought you to Islam?
All right, fantastic. I just want to start off first by saying it's an absolute honour to have both of you guys. I genuinely am honoured. I do not think I'm in any way worthy. I think there's a lot of people, genuinely, who put a lot more time into their faith and deserve to sit next to you guys. So I'm genuinely honoured, and I genuinely believe I'm not worthy. So thank you. I spent a lot of hours watching both of you guys do your thing. I love the precision and the way you use your words and the way you speak to your faith with such passion and such power. It was very inspirational for me to be drawn to Islam. So that the dawah is working even with the person you sit next to. So thank you. Thank you. It's amazing. So thanks. So my path to Islam, 15 years in the Middle East. Even in 2004, I'd be sitting in a coffee shop in Tehran or having dinner on a rooftop in Damascus, and I'd have people trying to get me to consider Islam. So it's not a new thing. I believe you become a Muslim before you take Shahada concept applied very strongly. And more, even to this day, and I'd love to speak to it, the more I read about Islam, the more I say, hang on, I figured that out after 30 years on this planet. And here it is in a book that was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The amount of moments I've had, the Japanese have a term called satori. It's where like the break through the cloud, the aha moment. The amount I have them daily with Islam because I find belief systems
Does
that
your name come from that tutorial? Is there any connection?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, true, good catch.
Yeah.
Pretty much every day I have moments where, whether it's talking to brothers like you or reading, I find belief systems that I've learned independently over the years or that I've realised to be true already exist in Islam and are spoken about and conceptualised even clearer.
Wow.
That, to me, every day I'm reminded of the power in the books and in the discussions. And I think myself, like Tate, very driven towards truth, very driven towards understanding what is this human experience about, how do I best live. Personally, I really believe that humans need dogma. We need guidance. You're going to get that from faith or you're going to get it from culture. Astaghfirullah, what a horrible place to get guidance from. Or maybe you get it from governments under like a communist system. But I think if we as humans are all looking for some sort of guidance as to how do I answer the big questions in my life, how do I find that community, how do I know I'm living on the straight path, Sirat al-Mustaqim, you cannot get a stronger interpretation of the human experience nor a clearer set of guidelines of dogma as to how to live than Islam. And for me, what I love is I thought religion was read the Bible occasionally, go to church once a week, maybe. Then I come into Islam and it's this entire system for living, for interacting with people, for entering somebody's house. The amount of detail and guidance, again, based on the principle that humans need that to be fulfilled, Islam cannot be questioned as the most powerful and clear guidance for life. So, yeah, obviously I'm quite excited. It's not just the Red Bull. The more I read about Islam, the more I go to the masjid, alhamdulillah, right next to my house, the more hungry I am to make more time to read more and to speak more. Let's say you go to school and you have to learn something, you have to force yourself to learn it. So my journey in Islam is completely the opposite. I am working less and I'm saying no to money occasionally, because I do like to be successful, which I love to talk about. It's not a bad thing.
Sure.
But I'm pushing contracts away so that I have more time to read about Islam because I find it so fulfilling and there's so much power there. There's genuine power there that I'm only beginning to understand, but I can see that more and more, inshallah, throughout my life, faith will become every day, ideally, a bigger percentage of my time and focus. That's my current intent.
Hamza, did you have a similar experience? Thank you for that, man. But that was beautiful the way you articulated that, by the way. I mean, and do you know what I find really amazing is even now your Arabic is actually really good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you guys know, but he's learning Arabic, and
Yes.
he's as you heard there, Sirat al-Mustaqim, so on. He's actually got good makharij al-huruf, pronunciation and so on. Yeah. Was your experience similar?
Yes. I think it took longer because I became Muslim when I was 22 years old.
Okay.
So I didn't have much life experiences, and your brain stops developing at 25.
For those who think you're Pakistani.
Yeah, I'm Greek, yeah. So I became Muslim 20 years ago, 2002. I was 22 years old. October the 5th. Alhamdulillah.
October the 5th?
October the 5th, yeah. I told you, I texted you the other day, I said, it's your birthday. I became Muslim on your birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was thinking, my God.
Alhamdulillah. So basically, I agree with you. I think Islam can be described as a kind of lock, if you like, or a key. And where the lock, and then the key goes into the lock and opens the door to well-being. That's the best way to put it. Now, throughout my experiences, I'm 42 years old now, so throughout my experiences, when I read a hadith, a narration of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, it makes much more sense to me now than it did when I was maybe 22 years old, because I didn't have those life experiences. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, look at the wisdom. So even now, I'm a speaker, I've written a book, whatever the case may be, even now I'm getting these aha moments thinking,
Oh, wow. Really?
this is exactly why.
Yeah.
This is deep, this is profound. Because even with Quranic verses, they're like diamonds, right? And if you put some light through it, it'll refract in different ways. And it's like an infinite ocean, if you like. So every verse, for example, you can unpack so many layers and layers of meaning. And that's why, one scholar once said, you don't really read the Quran reads you. So you would find yourself in the Quran. And every time you're going through this kind of existential life journey, you will find yourself in there. So if you add all those things together, in my view, the Quran or Islam is a key that basically just fits into the lock perfectly. And we've been trying so many keys in our lives. I was in Tibetan Buddhism, I looked into this, that, and the other. And you know what? The key's not fitting. But Islam, you put Islam into your lock, if you like, your existential lock, your spiritual lock, it just opens you out and you're free to experience the world. And you have a good well-being in this life and inshallah in the akhirah as well.
It's very interesting that you say that. I did yogic retreats. I went to Dharamsala, where the Tibetan government in exile live. I was a truth seeker as well. I found some element of guidance and of well-being, but we have to agree Islam is so far superior to. And I've looked into all of the major religions.
Yes, of course.
The sense of not just peace and well-being, but knowing that you are living the way, if I can say it, humans are meant to live.
Wow.
Islam gives you that so clearly. That's your experience as a
100%. Well, Islam, if you think about it, it gives you solutions at every level. So you have the social political, for example, we have a great economic system. It deals with the number one economic problem, which is not the accumulation of wealth, it's the distribution of wealth, right? That's the number one key issue, right? Then you have things like, for example, spiritual needs. Like we have a need, we have an affinity to worship something. As Martin Lings, the famous thinker, said, man cannot not worship. You're worshipping anything. Even the neoliberal order, what they're worshipping is an abstract idea of freedom.
Or their desires as well.
Their desires, the shahawat, the blameworthy desires. So their chase for this absolute freedom is really their fitrah, the innate disposition, chasing the divine, because only Allah is absolutely free, right? So all of these things. So if it fills the spiritual needs, it solves political issues, social issues, issues between male and female, like gender interaction, marriage, morality. I mean, Islam provides solutions at every single level.
And even, I think nowadays, as I spoke with our 3 Muslim brothers, shout out those guys, amazing brothers. I've got a lot of love for them. The idea of masculinity nowadays, in the West especially, it is genuinely being questioned as to whether it's even a healthy thing. And I think we see more and more a lot of men having a bit of a crisis of, well, hang on, I want to be big and strong, but I'm being told that that's childish and I shouldn't do it. I want to learn to fight, but I'm being told that that's aggressive and I shouldn't do it. Islam, for me, is the most healthy and balanced way with which to express masculinity, the positive masculinity. Yes, grow a beard. Yes, be strong. Yes, if you want to have a dog, it has to be a guard dog, not a little yip-yip dog. The way Islam holds you and almost enforces masculinity, but also it's your duty to look after your family.
Yes, that's right.
The Prophet, alayhi wassalatu wassalam, was very empathetic, had high social intelligence. So to me, it's a very rounded masculinity and a very healthy, positive masculinity for yourself as a man, for your family, for society that we see within Islam. And I think today, especially in the West, masculinity is confused or non-existent or just polluted by a lot of liberal ideas.
Do you know, before we get to this, because I want to really open the can of worms, if you like, with masculinity and gender, intersexual dynamics, all that kind of thing. I want to speak just a little bit about the concept of God in Islam. Because for me, obviously, I've always kind of believed in God, being, born into a Muslim family and so on. What was your experiences like before, both of you? I mean, did you believe in God, or if now that you do believe in God, how has that changed your life? Because I've seen you praying in the masjid, for example, and it was really a beautiful sight to behold, because you were trying to pray, you were doing it, mashallah, very well in the masjid. Many born Muslims don't do this kind of thing now, even now. What would you say? How would you speak to that in terms of your concept of God, Tawheed and monotheism? Now that you've got a God to worship, how has that changed your life?
I think it's simplified things. As a truth seeker who's looking for guidance from many different places, it can get a bit confusing.
Yes.
Whereas when the beauty of Tawheed, all right, this is it. This is the truth. So it's a more efficient pursuit of truth once you've converted to Islam. In terms of my interpretation of God, I think there's two ways to look at it. For me, first of all, there's the pragmatic. Now, if I'm a human who thinks all that matters is me and the universe revolves around me and there is no higher accountability, your life is going to be worse and your mindset and your daily experience is going to be worse than if you think, hang on, I need to be grateful for what I've got. Gratitude, there are so many studies now tying in gratitude and happiness. So therefore, believing in God will make you more grateful, will make you more happy. If you're walking around thinking, I can do whatever I want, there's no accountability, there's no akhirah, your life is going to be a mess. So I think I've always known that on a practical level, for the health, mental, physical of my family, for my pure, the quality of my daily life, believing in a higher force is useful on a pragmatic level. But then if we talk about the emotional, the inner state, I've always known that meditation is important and I've meditated all my life. However, I don't really do that anymore because I have that. I have the masjid. And we want to talk about Qadr Allah.
Yes.
It was always, when I moved to this house, it's like, oh, that's cool, masjid. Because I've always liked the call to prayer, the sound of it. Whereas now I can walk across the road.
Wow.
It is genuinely, it's a blessing.
Do you know on this point, I mean, this is kind of, when I had this conversation with Jordan Peterson, I had a conversation in the mosque actually. You were there.
Yes.
We both had the conversation with him. And there was one thing that kind of went undetected or wasn't emphasized after that conversation with him. Because I mentioned something in the Quran which says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. That whoever averts himself away from my remembrance, they will have a depressed life. That's what Allah says in the Quran. So I brought that to Jordan Peterson's attention because obviously him being a clinical psychologist and probably one of the era's best ones, I mean, many people could just ask the question, why is it that he's, sorry to say, depressed?
Sure.
So
and needing to take medication.
He took medication, all this kind of thing. So what I was trying to put to his attention by being subtle and also respectful of his own mental condition is that the Quranic prescription for this is actually to worship one God. And he agreed with it.
Yes.
He said, and he actually gave a reasoning for it. And if one listens to what he said that is because if you direct your attention to one thing, it's very similar to what you just said. If you direct your attention to one thing, rather than your attention being directed to something which is multiplicitous, and he started doing this with his finger, that's what he usually does, right? He says, then, because when you direct your attention to something multiplicitous, it causes anxiety because you don't know how to direct your attention.
This is grounding. This is a rock. Yeah.
And what you said about meditation, I just want to add to that because I was actually looking into that. It was very, very interesting because there are many peer-reviewed journals in molecular biology and different kinds of things about meditation, and it's pretty much established now that meditation is actually good for your health and your stress levels and all those kind of things. But if you consider, like you talk about Buddhism and the Vedic tradition and these kind of things, like transcendental meditation, if you consider the fact that what really are the traits of transcendental meditation or the traits of meditation in general, one of the key things is being present in the moment. They will always say that any self-help book that you read on the issue, or even generally if you go to these kind of, they'll say being present. The Power of Now is a book that's very famous, for example. This is one of the prerequisites to prayer.
Yes.
So al-hudur, which is referred to as like being present, knowing that Allah is hearing you, knowing that Allah is seeing you, knowing that Allah is with you, not physically in the essence sense, but here Allah is with you. Knowing that as you're praying now, you're communicating with God, that nothing else matters at that moment except for your communication with God. That you are now submitting yourself in the way that the creator of the heavens and the earth, wants you to submit yourself to him. You're submitting yourself to God in the present moment. You're not thinking in a future-centered way, because now in the hustle and bustle of the world around us, we always think about the future.
And on that, brother, you saw what I did with my little book.
Exactly.
So I'll walk over. I don't want to interrupt your phone.
No, of course.
I'll walk over to the masjid as soon as call to prayer. Before the prayer, I'll read my book. I want to get really specific with praying and make sure I'm doing everything right. And my Arabic isn't where it will be soon, inshallah. And then afterwards,
It's really good.
thank you, brother. Thank you. Afterwards, I'll sit there and I'll read my book as well. Then I'll come back to my house where there's work and there's phone calls, and that is my place of, as you said, separate from dunya, from fitra. That's where I just focus on what matters. And what I also, even to your point, I'd understood through lived a human experience that the intent with which you approach a task is key. And then in Islam, we have the concept of niyyah. And so even when we're doing ghusl or wudu, having that niyyah, that intent, I'm now washing off, whether it's the stresses or the dirt or the unclean energies of which comes with, lived human experience, and I'm purifying myself in a way before I go and communicate with God. Just that intent alone is going to then make the process of prayer more powerful.
Yes.
These sorts of concepts don't exist in meditation. Just sit, think, feel relaxed.
Right.
If you are going with a very clear intent, to your point, this is a special moment, everything's being put aside, I'm now preparing myself to go and communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is more powerful than any meditation on the planet.
Absolutely. And I was reading a book, interesting, honestly, even with meditation, because I do a lot of, mindfulness exercise. That's become very popular in the West, right? I do it myself sometimes. I just want to see what it's all about, and there's nothing to it, really. They tell you to focus on something, because in Buddhism, I think they call it the monkey mind.
Mm-hmm.
That your mind is going all over the place, because you can't, it's very difficult for 5 minutes if you tell someone, just don't think about anything. So they'll say, focus on your breathing and just focus on that, for example. Even then it becomes difficult, even then it becomes tedious and sometimes monotonous. I think that because the prayer actually offers you a script, or when you're doing dhikr, for example, which is remembrance of God, and you're saying subhanallah, or glory be to God, alhamdulillah, praise and thanks be to God, or Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. It's just about as much thought as you need to stay focused and to not let your mind go into that monkey mind state, and also allow you to go into a state of flow to keep your mind rested and lively at the same time.
Well,
it's one of the best things you can do.
The point is you're having a relationship.
Yes.
When you're doing, whether you're meditating, whether you're doing one of these new age spiritual techniques, which are really old, but they've basically projected them into the modern domain, they repackaged them. I see this, this might be a controversial statement, I see this as a form of self-worship. Because what you're doing, because what is spirituality? It's a connection with the one that created you, or with at least something outside of the universe. We could agree on that. But this kind of secular form of spirituality is, right, it's more, it's you're chasing your utility, a certain particular goal. I want to feel good. I want to feel better.
And that's why so many hippies have those spiritual egos.
Yes, oh, thank you. This is very deep. So the point here is, when you're having a relationship with Allah, He is al-mutakabbir, for example. He is the grandiose. He is al-Rahman, intensely merciful. He is al-Wudud, the most loving. He is al-Rahman, intensely merciful. He's al-Rahim. He's the one. He's has a special mercy that he's giving. He is al-Hakim, the wise. He has the picture. We just got the pixel, right? You're relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in that process, you're doing it in a way that is submissive, full of love, and is directed and intentional. This is what you describe as khushu' in a way, which in the Quran, in the chapter that says the believers, chapter 23, the first line says, "Successful indeed are the believers who pray with khushu', with this sense of, it's hard to translate that word in English. It's like a sense of heartbrokenness, a sense of humility to God, loving Allah, because worship in Islam is not just doing an act. There's an internal and external aspect. It means to love God, to know God, to obey God, to be humble before Him, to submit to Him, and to direct all your acts of worship to the divine. Yeah? So it's a whole beautiful package. But I just wanted to put this on the new Muslim journey. Before I became Muslim, I learned how to pray. It was such a transformative experience. I would be in subjects. I remember my friend, Dr. Ahmed, who used to train with him in Legion Fitness, the wrestler. I wasn't Muslim then. I remember him telling our Muslim friends, "You are closest to your Lord in prostration."
I feel that every time
Wallahi.
I really feel
And
that.
think about the symbolism here, because your face is like the symbol of the ego, and you're putting it where it belongs, because you are nothing compared to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is even no comparison. Laysa kamithlihi shay, which doesn't mean there is nothing like God. If you look at the Arabic, laysa kamithlihi shay, there is nothing as his example, which is like a linguistic ploy to emphasize even more transcendence, right? So, salah, prayer was everything for me, because it helped internalize all the kind of abstract intellectual stuff like one God and Quran is a miracle and so on and so forth. But I have a quick challenge. The challenge is this: I really believe if every single human being comes to the Quran with an open heart, they would be compelled to accept this conception of the divine. It is intuitive, spiritual, and rational. It satisfies the mind and it brings tranquility to the heart. The concept of divine oneness in the Quran, if you compare it to the Christian tradition or other traditions, it's just on another level. I would even go as further to say, go to the 112th chapter of the Quran, which is really a summary of divine oneness. Read it and analyze it, and I'm telling you that would be sufficient, because it's the criterion for, even if you were to sit in a dark room and think about, right, who is God, and you had a sense of sincerity, you would align yourself to the words in the Quran. Allah is uniquely one. Qul huwallahu ahad, which means uniquely one. He is independent. He is self-subsisting. Everything depends on him. He begets not, nor was he begotten, and there is nothing like him. And even if you read the first line, Qul huwallahu ahad, Allah, what does Allah mean? According to the Arabic linguist, it's al-ilah, the deity, the one who's worthy of worship and love and connection. And Allah is such a beautiful name. It encompasses all the names in the Quran, which therefore you go into the Quran and you start seeing words like names like Al-Wadud, the most loving, Al-Rahman, the most merciful, Al-Bar, the source of all goodness, Al-Hakim, the most wise, Al-Alim, the most knowing, and so on and so forth. So I truly believe, as a challenge to anyone watching this, if you are sincere, go to 112th chapter and look at the whole of the Quran, look at God's names and attributes. It will be inevitable, if you're sincere, that you're going to be like, this is it for me.
Yeah, cool. And just to tie that up as well, through prayer, there's that element of humility. You are putting your face on the ground.
100%.
There is something higher than you. The problem with this modern day liberal endorsed spirituality is you're not conceptualizing the fact that you are below. All these, a lot of the hippies, because I come from a hippie family, they got massive egos. They think they're special because they meditate. Because that lacks that what you just talked about, that overarching framework with which to carry out the meditation, if you will. Salah has not just that concept of you should be humble because there's something bigger than you over meditation. I also view it as very powerful programming, in that you say the same things numerous times, they're going to imprint deeper in the brain, right? If you say, my favorite line every time I pray, I love it, and Tate and I have discussed this exact line, A'udhu billahi minash shaitana rajim. I love that. You are reminding yourself evil exists in this world, and guess what? You need to seek guidance and help from something bigger than you in order to resist evil. In the West, they don't really think about that. They don't remind themselves 5 times a day, or technically twice, because when you leave the mosque, you remind yourself again, that there's many influences, shaitan or jinn or whatever you want to call it, who are trying to push me towards, indulge in hedonism, or rip off, someone in a business deal, or be unkind to your neighbor. If you don't remind yourself regularly about the fact that shaitan exists, and especially with the new liberal order, this religion of wokeism, you will be pushed towards that which feels good, that which is gratifying. Why not do drugs? Why not have casual sex with endless women? But the power of, again, the idea that prayer is somehow positive mantras or positive statements that drill down into your mind. You remind yourself 5 times a day, no, evil exists, and I'm aligning with the highest force in the universe to resist that evil. That's going to make you a better person. And nowadays in the West, endless pornography for young men on these phones. Drugs accessible. Tinder makes casual sex accessible. What framework do young men in particular have with which to resist all of the temptations and the evil of the world, if not Islam? What is telling them? What is keeping them on the straight path other than Islam? I don't see anything. And actually, there was a Warham guy who joined Islam recently. Lord Bear is his name. He's on YouTube. At 21 years of age, he said, I cannot resist. I cannot resist everything that's out there, whether it's women or parties or hedonism or all these things. I'm choosing Islam because I know it'll make me more effective as a human. It'll make my life a lot healthier. I'll be a lot more productive for society. So at 21, he and very, very passionately took Shahada and became Muslim because he knows that Satan is real and he seeks guidance from Allah to resist Satan. It's showed me a more powerful reminder every day. I love it.
Do you know one thing that was kind of semi-viral in itself? I mean, your discussion with the 3 Muslims became viral. I mean, it was a really good discussion. But one kind of segment of that discussion, which was really good, was when you were speaking about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We talked about Allah. I mean, I want to ask you about, from what you've read of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what compelled you, what persuaded you that this was the model?
So that was reading about the Prophet was what made me understand that Islam was the way and the superior choice.
Wow.
And I think what it was is a lot of people are glorified and looked up to nowadays. Influencers, celebrities, footballers. A person, who cares? You kick a football well. Yay. Congratulations. But when you look at the Prophet, ﷺ, what area of life did he not excel in? He didn't just lead one family, he led many. He was in battle, a proven leader, and having experienced combat, it's no joke. You know what I mean? You want to talk about stoicism and being calm under pressure, combat will show that. He was successful in business. The obstacles he went through in his life, but he still stayed true to what he was doing, the sacrifices he made. Show me a better person through history who greater deserves that celebrity status or that influencer status. Show me. And also, I think part of the reason why I support Tate is that people who follow Tate and watch his long-form content are positively impacted by his messages.
Yes.
Now, I think that separates him from other influencers in that what positive benefit do you get from following many of these people who are famous for the sake of being famous? Yes. Many of the YouTubers, there's no benefit to the fans who consume their content.
That's true.
Now, for me, that's again, I wish, I know it's a bit impractical, but I wish the youth of today could somehow compare their role models or the influences that they consume the words of with the Prophet, because you cannot debate, you cannot compare. If you want to look up to a certain person throughout history, I'm sorry, it's not a footballer.
That's right.
It's not.
That's right.
It's the Prophet, who achieved so much in every area. So to this day, there are 2 billion people who look to him as the most important human on the planet. Why are we looking at influencers? Why are we looking at celebrities when we have that clear, well-documented example of what can be achieved in life? And also the other piece, without going on too much,
Go ahead.
in a world where masculinity is confused,
Yes.
I think that the Prophet ﷺ embodied a very rounded masculinity in that he was, let's be honest, he was a killer. He killed people in battle, but at the same time he showed empathy and he was level-headed enough in battle to decide not to kill as well. And that's, as a former soldier, professionalism isn't necessarily just putting rounds down, it's having that judgment call to show restraint. So he proved, also if we talk about the way he ran his families, he was very firm. At one point he went away from his wives for 29 days, I believe it was, and just said, no, you don't deserve my attention.
That's right.
But at the same time, he was very empathetic and very caring. Show me a better example of a well-rounded man, someone who is capable of taking life, but at the same time is empathetic enough and caring enough to nurture and lead multiple families. I think it's incredible.
This is so beautiful.
I love the way you put that.
Yeah, perfect. It reminds me of something I've been talking about when people say, Hinduism is peaceful, Buddhism is peaceful, and you have these monks in jungles or forests talking about compassion and peace. I'm thinking, with all due respect, you don't have the power not to be compassionate. How can you even be merciful? You don't even have the ability. But if you look at the life of the Prophet, I want you to just reflect on this, right? He was tortured, abused, boycotted, right? He had to tie 2 stones to his stomach because he was so hungry. His companions were killed. And in the Battle of Uhud, when he was injured, he almost died. One of the companions said, why don't you, make dua, curse them. Do you know what he said? Even in that moment when he had every right, he said, I was not sent here to curse or condemn. I was sent here as a mercy. Oh, Allah forgive them for they don't know. And that's in the midst of battle and he was dead. Hamza radiallahu anhu was mutilated, his uncle. So that's one aspect. Look at the mercy and compassion here. Also, now look at when he took over Mecca. Now he had the power. Apart from certain exceptions, which were part of due process and law, there was a general amnesty. What did he call the day, bro? He called this the day of mercy, not a day of revenge. When he had the ability. So you can't say you're compassionate and you're nice. You haven't been tested in battle or in authority.
And also there's proof there, again, with respect to the Tibetan monks. They got absolutely eaten alive by China.
Yeah.
So it's all good to speak compassion if you're not ready to defend your faith, and you're just going to get it's a horrible thing that happened.
But of course, but it's a full sense of compassion because compassion doesn't mean being passive. Compassion means being,
I think
I'm
you're
going to
right.
stand up and be brave,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be courageous to defend my people, which for the Prophet ﷺ included Muslims and non-Muslims, by the way. He had no political authority. He was defending the Jews. He was defending the Christians. He was defending the Muslims of his authority. And this is why it's very important. When you look at the Prophet ﷺ in the right context, you cannot be. There's no other way but to conclude that this man was the best man. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That walked this path.
I want to add something to what you just said that I think is really powerful.
Sure.
The point you made about mercy.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right, because, like, for example, if someone was to be thrown in prison, if me and you were to be thrown in prison right now, and then I say to the prison guard, I say, I'm being merciful to you. It doesn't even make sense linguistically or logically, because you can't be merciful to someone who's got the upper hand on you.
Absolutely.
You can only be merciful to someone you've got the upper hand on.
Yes.
And there's actually a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ where a person tried to kill him with a sword. It's in Bukhari, it's a very famous hadith. And then the person dropped the sword, the Prophet carried it, and he didn't exact revenge on him. Now that's mercy. Where he could have exacted revenge on him. I mean, well, he didn't kill him, and then that person became Muslim because he saw what mercy looked like in the flesh. And that's why Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We have not sent you except for mercy to mankind. What I found so amazing is that what you said there was really beautiful, because it's that Goldilocks zone of virtuous, impeccable character. I mean, when Allah says in the Quran, for example, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that you have the impeccable virtue.
Yes.
I mean, what does this even mean? It's very interesting that you're Greek, and you've got the Nicomachean Ethics, the book that Aristotle wrote, and he was talking about virtue. I think there's a lot of truth in that book, where he basically says that, you've got two things, two extremes, and you have the Goldilocks zone. You've got rashness, and you've got cowardice, and then you've got bravery in the middle, for example. And some people, it's so easy for people to exhibit one of those characteristics and not the other, or not to get that middle ground. So being merciful and brave at the same time, I mean, there's so much evidence. I mean, imagine if, for example, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya mentions in his Kitab Zayd al-Ma'ad, he mentions that the Prophet Muhammad went into 19 military expeditions. And imagine he did that in the span of 10 years. That's almost 2 on average per year, where he's putting his own life on the line.
Yes.
This, and also his followers. I mean, we were just speaking before the podcast about Ali ibn Abi Talib. I'm not sure if it's an amazing story, because he's a paragon of bravery himself. Ali ibn Abi Talib, of course, being his companion and part of the family of the Prophet Muhammad. And we were talking about an amazing story of this individual called Amr ibn Abi Abdul Wud. Amr ibn Abdul Wuddin, this individual who was, like, from the pagan side, seen as one of the most powerful men. And he came to fight. And before, what would happen is that they used to have very honorable kind of ways of fighting each other. So they have one-on-one. So before we go, all the armies fight each other, we're going to have one-on-ones called Mubaraza or Mushatara. So they used to fight each other. And this guy, he was known to be one of the most powerful fighters, this Amr individual, and he was goading and emasculating, he was trying to emasculate the Muslim population. He's going to fight me. And Ali ibn Abi Talib, he stood up and he said, I'm going to, let me do it. Let me fight. Let me fight on your behalf. And then he got up, and then the Prophet said, Ijlis innahu Amr, sit down, because this guy's no joke. And then went back and forth, and he didn't want to even see it. So they fought each other. And Ali ibn Abi Talib put his life on the line. This is an example of bravery. Because if you lose the fight, it's not like an MMA fight or kickboxing or boxing. It's not going to be, okay, you can live to fight another day, or you have a rematch clause. You die. If you lose, you die.
Absolutely.
This is the highest level of bravery. When you're putting yourself forward to a fight on one-on-one with a sword, and the guy he's a favorite, and you are the underdog. You're putting yourself, you want to fight this guy. So these are the kinds of examples.
Also, the Battle of Hunayn, bro.
For example,
when the arrows were coming and the Sahaba were holding him back, Abu Sufyan was holding him back, and he was marching forward.
The Quran.
Saying, I am the messenger of Allah, I am not a liar.
Beautiful.
He was tested to the degree where to claim that he is even a liar is logically equivalent of claiming your mother didn't give birth to you. SubhanAllah. Because you have far more testimonial evidence and contextual, psychological, social, political evidence to show that the person was not a liar than the evidence that your mama actually gave birth to you.
I just want to say one thing. You guys are so well read. Like PhD guys, I'm a former soldier. I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying. This is what I'm going to watch the video back in half speed so I can understand what you're saying.
Your life experience is like 5 PhDs.
Genuinely, I am honoured to have you guys in my house. I really mean that. Thank you so much.
But the thing about the Prophet is the bravery, but think about
the mercy as well.
The power. What I mean by power is the psychological power. Like, there was a famous story, because I call this how you relate is what you create. He would optimize a person in every situation. Do you know how hard that is?
That's leadership right there.
It's phenomenal leadership,
Yeah.
right? I try and use that. We try and instill that in our organization, but it's hard. Is your linguistic utterances and your behaviors, they should be such that you intend well-being for them more than yourself, that you love them more than yourself from that degree, and you're committed to the well-being and the guidance, and the way you express yourself in the particular context is to optimize that person. For example, Fudala ibn Umar was circumambulating the Kaaba. He became nominally Muslim. He wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ. I think he was holding a dagger or something. And the Prophet said, what are you saying to yourself?
Yeah.
And he kind of reacted. And what did the Prophet do? He put his hand on his heart. He said, ask Allah for forgiveness. And Fudala ibn Umar after that says, after that moment, no one was more beloved to me than the Prophet ﷺ. So how he related through his body language and his linguistic utterances in that particular context for that person's well-being, develop the optimized version.
And to add to this point,
sure.
just one more. I
Of
want to
course,
go back
yeah,
to
of course,
I don't want to
sure.
talk too much.
I'm loving this. Keep going. This is
I'm a
amazing.
very gracious individual. I mean, I talk too much. Anyways, my wife tells me all the time. But I was going to say that one really interesting example on this optimization and stuff like that, and mercy as well. Yeah, is that there was a person called Julaybib. Julaybib was an individual who had dwarfism. Okay, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, he was seen to have deformed features, structural features and stuff of the face and of the body, and he found it very difficult to get married. So the Prophet, long story short, he went to a family and he said, "I want to get married," and they thought in the beginning that he was talking about him getting the Prophet getting himself married, but he was intending Julaybib, and he essentially got him married to this woman of this noble family, and then he went out and fought. Julaybib went out and fought in the next expedition, and he was killed. And he asked, the Prophet asked, who died in this expedition? And they listed certain names. They didn't mention Julaybib. But the Prophet himself, he was in a saddened state, and he said, this man is from me and I'm from him. In other words, he looked at everybody, at every subsection of society, and he made sure that everybody was given their right. Disabled people, black people, women, children. It's not just a matter. Islam is a very inclusive religion because it's for everybody. It really is. It really is an inclusive religion for everyone. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, being who he was able to kind of relate and connect, and as you mentioned, optimize a relationship with every single person in that society, I think is really powerful indication of the kind of character he was. Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer, he says something interesting. He says that I don't look at how people deal with me, I look at how they deal with the waiter.
Yes.
Because it's not about your true character, is how you deal with people at all levels of society.
Absolutely.
But we've spoken about, so I want to go back to.
I'm enjoying. That's what I'm sitting in the sort of podcast I watch. I spent so many hours watching both of you guys.
No, but
I'm now sitting hearing it. I love it. It's amazing.
Honestly, I'm sitting in the kind of podcast that we watch as well. But, I was going to ask you now. Obviously, now we've been under attack. Maybe all three of us. Actually, definitely all three of us. By people, because not just about connection to Andrew Tate, and that's something, of course, as Muslim people will always be proud to be connected with every single Muslim man, woman, or child that there is. We have nothing to apologize. The media, it's been coming at us, the liberal, woke, left-wing media, with all kinds of things. Tell us some of the things that you've experienced with the media, because I know they've come be speaking to you. And what do you think their agenda is? What do you think they're trying to achieve?
Well, the first thing I've realized is nowadays there is no such thing as journalistic ethics anymore.
Yes.
And I'm an investigator. I was trained back in the day. I've been an investigator in the private space for 15 years. I'm capable. I've taught many other investigators how to do their job.
Yeah.
One of the first things you learn as an investigator is the credibility of source. You must assess that, and also cross-checking sources. I've heard this from one person. I've also heard that from another person. Okay, it's more credible. It's more likely to be true. The amount of mistruths that have been published on tape from big media houses, they very easily, with a little bit of what's known as OSINT, open source intelligence, just basically using Google and other search engines, you can find out to not be true. It's inconceivable that journalists are that poor at their jobs. So the answer then is there is an agenda.
Yes.
They sit there and with their editorial meetings and they decide on the party agenda, and the party agenda is we need to burn Andrew Tate. So find whatever you can to burn Andrew Tate. Don't look for truth. I mean, any journalist who wants to say Tate got famous for saying misogynistic things, have a look at the comments under his videos. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions of positive comments about how Tate has inspired so many people, men and women, to say, you know what, I'm gonna put aside all of this liberal hedonistic stuff, and I'm going to embrace traditional gender roles. Or women all the time, I've seen in many social settings say, thank you for speaking up for women like me who want to be feminine, who want to be a caregiver, who want to prioritize family. Thank you, Andrew. Women say this to him.
Yeah,
the media won't acknowledge that, though, because their party line is we need to burn Andrew Tate. So the idea that somehow all the journalists in the world are missing, in this instance, the fact that there's positivity behind Andrew, and they're just saying, oh yeah, he rose to prominence due to saying controversial things. What a disgusting fallacy.
Yes.
And what proof that nowadays Western journalism is not in any way driven to find truth. They're not practicing any sort of thorough investigative processes. They're just pushing their agenda. So seeing it firsthand, even big names, like the world-leading media houses, I have zero faith in them. I have zero belief anymore because they're not reporting the news.
Yes.
They're pushing an agenda. They are pure propaganda machines at this point. I've seen it firsthand. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. It's very interesting. Thank you, by the way, yesterday for jumping on with that journalist who was coming after Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Very interesting. There was a journalist they're putting forward a documentary questioning Andrew's faith, and they had a bunch of leading questions. I mean, for those who, a leading question is, so on that day you were pretty angry, weren't you? You know, it was, well, hang on. You're trying to push towards a certain answer.
Yeah.
You know, cops will use that in interviews.
Yeah.
The leading questions coming out of this individual, we record it in full form, something we learned from Vice, record everything in full form. I know you said that's a rule. One leading question after another. And the way this individual was trying to push the fallacy that Tate somehow chose Islam because it would benefit him in terms of his life. I'm like, hang on, first of all, when you become Muslim, there's plenty of hate that comes with that. It's not just benefit.
That's right.
Secondly, his main home base is a strongly Orthodox country. The idea that he did it for some kind of benefit, or that it was the timing was mysterious. I first hosted Andrew Tate in the Middle East in 2018. Even back then, he was meeting Muslim brothers who took their faith seriously. Even back then, we were talking about Islam and the fact that, you know, the call to prayer is there's some power there. This is 5 years ago. More and more, he was spending more time in the Middle East. He decided he wanted to live here. More and more, he was spending time around other Muslims. The idea that it's somehow, what a coincidence that he converted. Of course he converted. He was a truth seeker as well. He speaks about the devil all the time. If you are consciously, he believes, Andrew Tate believes to the point where he will put his own welfare at risk that he is leading the fight against Shaitan. Even a year ago, 2 years ago, he'd say that. Of course he's going to find Islam. Because again, when you pray, every time you conceptualize evil is out there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, please help me in my fight against Shaitan. So this journalist trying to say that he was somehow... Thank you, sir. There we go. People know this address. That's why I got the dog, actually. Well-trained guard dog. The idea that journalists are trying to question his faith, which for Muslims, as I understand it, is absolutely haram, is a terrible thing to do. I find it so disgusting. And I'd like to release that video. The way this individual... And the other thing, he was trying to say that Andrew had chosen Islam because it would help him with business in the Middle East. I'm sorry.
He doesn't need that.
Andrew's got enough clout.
Yeah, sure.
He doesn't need to be Muslim to have people wanting to partner with him. It's genuinely disgusting.
That's not how business in the Middle East works anyway.
No, of course not. Yeah. Genuinely disgusting. And then one of the questions was, but why doesn't he show more of his faith? It's like, hang on. First of all, you say he's using Islam just for personal benefit. But then you're questioning why he doesn't show his faith. It's because for him, his faith is a private thing. That's right. He didn't want to film Shahada. He didn't want to... He views, like, family, for example, was very private for him. You know, he's since gone now. I love Andrew Tate. Reads up G, inshallah.
That wasn't planned, by the way.
Yeah, okay, let's hope they move on. If not, I might need to go out and have a chat. But yeah, it's just my point here is I find it absolutely disgusting the way journalists will come after Tate, even questioning a man's faith with zero grounds, with zero reason, based on the fact that they don't like what he says on the internet. It's disgusting. What world are we in that you can call yourself a journalist and pretend that you're a professional when you are questioning a man's faith, one of the most deep and important things in anyone's life, based on tweets that you don't like? Or, you know, based on, again, information from non-credible sources. Yeah, so journalists, my goodness, absolute scum filth. And I've learned that from human experience.
You could the door swing both ways. You could just say to me, I don't think you're liberal enough. Sure. Maybe you're liberal because you're a coward. You have really strong conservative beliefs, but you stay liberal because you want to stay in your job. Isn't that true?
It's like men
You know,
who claim
just-
to be feminists. Maybe
yeah,
you're
yeah, just-
a feminist because
The door swings both
yeah,
ways.
you want-
You
you
just
want
challenge them.
benefits.
I mean, it is getting quite low if they have to start challenging someone's face. To be honest.
Horrible. And apparently this whole documentary is based on that. Disgusting. Where are people's ethics nowadays?
That's
And the amount of people who are experts on Andrew Tate, having never met him, or having met him once, and like it's again the amount of experts out there who are positioning with authority to speak about Andrew Tate. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I've been around the man.
That's right.
You know, I'm a family man. Back
Yes.
in the day, I held very high-level top secret clearances. I've held very senior corporate roles. I'm a person who can judge character.
Yes.
Indeed, I've been trained to assess, to profile, to interact with people. If Andrew Tate was in any way involved in such things, or even capable of such things, you think I'd have him in my house?
Yeah.
You think I'd go out and throw away my privacy, which I kind of liked, to speak openly? Now, I'm
Yeah.
speaking openly more and more because of the positive feedback I'm getting. The initial prompt for me to go loud was to support him and his character. A man of my standing, of my experience, of my ability to read people, I am the expert on Andrew Tate.
Mhm.
I've been around it.
Mhm.
Now, yes, as I've said numerous times, I'm not objective. I care for the man like a brother. I love him. You know what I mean? But I am credible. And I would not be sitting here arguing for him if he was in any way involved in any of this
Frankly,
nonsense.
bias doesn't always mean, for example, falsity.
Yeah,
Because some people say, well, you've got a bias because you can have a bias towards the truth.
everyone has a bias of some sort.
Yeah, so you can have the bias towards 2 plus. You can have a mathematical bias. There's no problem with it. So I have a mathematical bias. I believe 2 plus 2 equals 4. It doesn't mean that that is false. And the other thing I want to add is that a lot of the views that they come out with, for example, when you ask them to, because this is very famous now. I mean, you ask. I've done this myself. I mean, a lot of the journalists come to me and I say, give me an example of something that he said that, and they'll say, well, he says this and that about men and women. Whatever they quote, for the most part, I can bring you a rabbi who said the same thing.
Oh,
I can bring you an imam who said the same thing, maybe. I can bring you an Islamic scholar. I can bring you a Christian priest. You would never go, especially to a rabbi, for example, and say, well, your faith says this, you're this, because you're scared to be labeled an anti-Semite. You might not even do it with a Muslim guy who's for example, with Muslim all his life. You might do it with a Muslim guy, frankly, because you throw Islam under the bus, no problem. But there are certain communities of people you wouldn't actually question like that. For example, if I went to African, would you go to an African village of a tribe who believe very similar things to Andrew Tate and say, well, you believe in such and such and such thing? No, because you're afraid to be seen as an anti-black Orientalist, effectively, a colonial person. But the exact same thing's being uttered by a person who actually is, I think, he's half black or something like that. But that's aside the point. He's saying exactly the same thing as a tribe's leader would say in Ghana. Exactly the same thing. He's just maybe putting it in a different way, in a different language, with different expressions.
and also part of the reason why he's so popular, the majority of people agree with him. They just don't have, or they have too much to lose should they say it publicly. That's why he's so popular.
That's
You said something yesterday speaking to the journalist that he's speaking to age-old truths, to basic biological facts that the vast majority of the world agree with. They're just not in a position to be able to go and speak loudly because that religion of wokeism, that cancellation machine, would cost them too dearly, should they do so.
Yeah, I mean, we've got ample examples of this. For example, when Obama went to Kenya, his supposed home country, whatever, ethnic country of origin, and the issue of LGBT came about. And you should see how conflicted they are to speak about the issue. Because on the one hand, they were going to be colonial and impose a culture on the Africans. And they were so tentative and scared on the issue. But when it comes to Andrew Tate, no, let's just go for it. Because why? He's one of us. He's a Westerner. He's got enough white skin for us to attack him. That's not really a fair judgment. So in other words, certain people, they get a pass. Because it's effectively your reputation that you're trying to keep.
Yeah, I mean, we have to also understand that this is, and I don't mean this in a bad way, this is bigger than Andrew Tate. It's bigger than an individual. Andrew Tate has become a symbol of challenging kind of the liberal world order from that perspective.
100%.
And we have to frame it that way as well. Because at the end of the day, it's what they don't say that matters. Why aren't they putting these famous shaitanic rappers under the microscope as well? You know, people, have you seen some of the rap today and the videos? Why aren't you? And they have a huge negative influence on youth, right?
100%.
The narrative that's coming from Andrew Tate and others is be a family man, be authoritative, take care of your family,
Be disciplined,
be disciplined,
accountable.
be accountable, traditional values. But you have these rappers, some of them, they don't even have a gender now, they're like, God knows what they are these days. And they're like, literally, have you seen some of the videos? They're devil worshippers. What's that guy's name? I forgot the guy's name now. Very, very famous.
Yeah.
Why aren't you putting them under the microscope? They're doing far more damage. So the thing is, we have to see it from an ideological perspective as well. This is an ideological battle.
100%. 100%, it really is. And that's why I said, 5 years ago when I met Tate and I heard him speaking about the fact that the West is headed for decay and what he called a failed society, because the way man and woman interact has been interrupted. This assault on the family unit, the assault on masculinity, it's an assault on femininity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Women who want to be submissive and care for their husband and make the home a beautiful, healing place, they're getting shamed as well.
Yes.
It's a crisis of masculinity and femininity. Tate was saying clearly that interrupts the way kids are born and raised, and then at the macro level that interrupts the way societies are formed. That's why we have a failed society. 5 years ago, I said to him, first trip we'd gone on together, I see that you have an important role to play in terms of masculinity, in terms of humanity. I'll support you however I can. And here we are. He's become a cultural icon who is leading the charge, as I see it, genuinely. I'm not just saying this with hyperbole. I believe this literally. I believe that he is a leading figure in countering the effect of shaitan in the world. I mean, I don't know if that's, you'd view that as an overstatement.
No,
but I think in the culture wars,
look,
who else is speaking up like this?
Think about it right now. What he's saying, as we said before. First of all, let's look at feminism, because I think one cannot understand the phenomenon of Andrew Tate without understanding from a feminism, right? Yeah. Feminism is the second wave of it, been going on from the 1960s, right? Most of the studies that have ever been done on women's health, because you said it right, you said femininity, right, is being under attack. I agree with that wholeheartedly, because if you look at most of the studies, the biggest study ever to be done was Blanche Flower and Oswald. And it was a longitudinal study to be done from 1960s to 1990, I think it was 20 or 30 years. And they surveyed women in America and Britain, and they asked them, after the legislative changes, about equal acts and all this kind of thing, and obviously now more in the workplace than ever before after the sexual revolution in 1960 and so on, what their mental health was like. The vast majority of women, more than 80%, actually said that their mental health was worse. It's because you're trying to make a fish fly and make a bird swim. That's what you're effectively trying to do. So when the feminist movement tried to make the fish fly and the bird swim, all you've got was sickened animals.
Yes.
At the end of the day, and in this case we have, as you say, the intersexual dynamics were completely disrupted. So what he's doing is he's a corrective. He's a symbol of correction. Because the thing is, it's not just Andrew Tate. That's what I'm saying to people, is that this was happening before. Andrew Tate became famous. People had already found it. If you look at the surveys, there were surveys that were done in Germany. Most women in the early 2000s were saying they no longer want to identify as feminists, for example.
That's right. I remember that backlash. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there's studies that have been done. There's a study called the paradox of female happiness. I think that same thing. Why is it that women, the more rights they give, so-called rights, the more they go into the workplace? Why is it that we're seeing this double burden on them and the psychological breakdown?
And it's not realistic. The idea that a woman can manage a career and be an attentive mother and be an engaged lover for her husband, it's not real.
Yes. It's
just an unreasonable expectation being placed on women. And if I can just jump in on that, we can look at feminism from various frames. We can look at, for example, statistics that show the more liberal and feminist a country is, the higher the divorce rate, the higher amount of women living on antidepressants. You could argue there's not causation, it's just correlation. I think it's causation. We could look at the concept that through lived experience, and I tried to voice this on that Vice documentary. I think I did fairly well. The women who I've come across, and I've been to 90 countries, I've interacted with everyone at every different level of social status. I speak numerous languages. I like to really experience a culture. The women who I see who are most fulfilled in life are those who are adhering to traditional gender norms. They have a husband they can respect. They prioritize. They still have work, of course, but they prioritize the family and caring for their man and their loved ones over chasing a corporate status. And then on the flip side, the men who I see most fulfilled, again, let's look at it in terms of, you talked about biology. We are driven by testosterone as men on a very base level. Yes. That is to fornicate and to fight, to conquer. We need that mission focus. The men who I see are the most fulfilled have those daily wins, that conquest, whether it's through sport or through business or through that brotherhood of building empires together. Men who are on their mission are the most fulfilled. And we look at women, oxytocin, estrogen, the need for safety, to nest, to raise a family, to care. The women who are doing those things are the happiest. Is it really that difficult to think perhaps we should live in accordance to not all of human history, but also the actual chemicals that are running through our blood?
Yes, exactly.
Is that I don't know if chemicals is the right word, or endorphins, or
it's our nature.
It's the hormones that are in our blood. Perhaps if we live true to those, we might be fulfilled. Why is that equations so challenging and so difficult? Why are those maths so complex for the liberals to be able to do?
I think a lot of them now have denied a very basic thing in the Quran. وَلَيْسَ الذَّكَرُ كَالْأُنثَى. You know, that the male is not like the female. That's a verse in the Quran. It's a simple verse.
I'm glad we're sitting in Dubai saying things like that. You get cancelled saying that in London.
Do you know what I mean? That's a verse, a simple verse. The male is not. It's not saying one is better than the other.
Yeah.
It's not saying like intrinsically a man is better than a woman. It's not saying this. It's just saying they're not alike.
Mm.
And what we're saying is that nowadays we're even questioning this reality. We're questioning, is a man, a woman, a woman. So when society has become this sick and this deluded, then it's no wonder we're talking about the neurotransmitters, the hormones, whatever maybe in the body that we're now denying the existence of.
Sure.
I think that's one thing. And economically, what you're saying, mate, is cogent as well, because we've got the law of comparative advantage. And, when someone's got one specialism and the other one's got another specialism, once again, it's not, we don't want to put fish in water, in the sky, and fish tell them to fly. So the point is that once you respect that order, that hierarchy of God is the most high, and then you have, a managerial hierarchy. You have the husband telling the woman what to do, for example, and she has to be submissive to him and obey him.
But also, he has more. He has as Tate says, he has the authority, but he also has the responsibility. You cannot be a man who wants to tell a woman what to do unless you've really got it together, and you can look after her, look after your children, look after her parents, for example, with that authority to say, no, this is how it is in the household, is a caregiving and leading and protecting and providing responsibility. Women I know, they love that idea. They want to be looked after. They want to be protected. The feminists who and these liberal women saying, where have all the good men gone? The good men are adhering to traditional values. The very good men take faith, ideally something as strong as Islam, very seriously, so they have an accountability to a higher force. Your liberal men, who have no sense of higher accountability, nothing keeping them disciplined or on the straight path, and think that, everything should be equal. I actually heard something the other day. Apparently, in the West, it's women have asked for flowers from their partner, and the man has returned with, why don't you buy me flowers? That's the state we're in. This idea that, again, has been forgotten. The Quran says men and women are not the same.
Yes.
We have equal rights, sure, in terms of everyone being able to live safely and go about their daily life. But this idea that we're somehow the same is ruining the world. And it ties into one of the first things Tate said to me, that's why the West has failed, and that's why I'm sitting here supporting it.
It's oppressive, because treating two different things the same is oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
If two things are different and you're treating them the same,
that's what Aristotle said. That
he said that oppressive.
He said that you cannot treat different things equally.
Yes,
it's a very simple statement.
And you know what? It's not just the liberal world order; it's the postmodern world order now. Postmodernism, which basically says any form of hierarchy is a source of injustice and oppression. And they say there is no objective method to come to an objective truth. That's why they'll deny biology. They'll deny truth. They'll deny, you had some crazy person saying 2 + 2 is not really 4, right? Yeah.
He says that until he's in a building which requires an architect, which
absolutely.
Who puts 2 + 2 together to make 4.
And this is the problem. Now, what's really funny is they say there is no objective method to have an objective truth, but they believe in the objective truth that there are oppressive hierarchies.
Exactly.
It's a contradiction.
Oh, wow.
It is a total contradiction.
But that's what the left specialize in. And I want to drop something here that I read just the other day and went, oh, wow, so relevant. I was reading a book written hundreds of years ago, and it said that at the lowest level of hell, I forgot the name for that level, that's where the hypocrites are.
Yeah, it's not right.
And what is the one tendency we see in liberals above everything else? Hypocrisy. So nowadays, whenever I hear a liberal rant at me, or these haters, or these journalists, I'm just thinking in my head, man, you're going to Jahannam, and you're taking you're taking the elevator to the 7th floor. You're going direct, my friend. That's where they belong. They are hypocrites, and they're polluting the world.
I think sometimes we over-philosophize it, and we give it some kind of intellectual credence. But I think it's psychological. These people are ahlal shahawat. They are people of blameworthy desires. Literally, it is the worship of the self. Because Allah says in the Quran, have you not seen the one who takes his own desires as his Lord? Because liberalism is the primacy of the individual, the self, individualism. Postmodernism is the primacy of the individual to an excessive degree, right? So this is really what they're doing is moving away from the worship of Allah to the worship of yourself. Psychologically, I believe it's that. I want to do whatever I want to do. I don't care about hierarchy. I don't care about structures. I don't even care about truth. It's just me, whatever I identify, it's true. This is literally defined as self-worship. Have you not seen the one who takes his own desires as his Lord? So we should just expose it for that as well. You are auto deity. Yeah, you are worshipping yourself.
And how's that working out for you?
Yeah, no, it's not working out very well at all.
That's the litmus test, right?
And we need
How's
to
it
show
working
them
out
that Allah is the one worthy of worship. And once you do that, place your head on the floor, it'll elevate you.
I think what we started off by talking about when we talk about the meditative kind of schools of thought that are out there and so on, so we kind of want to talk about the things that the human being should be doing, which is closest to his nature. And the premise of what we're saying is that, in fact, the closer the human being is to his or her nature, they're more happy, more content, more purposeful, meaningful their lives will
and
be.
fulfilled. Let's use
fulfilled.
I mean, happiness is a mood, and also you can get happiness from hedonism.
Yes.
I think happiness is overrated.
Yes.
Fulfillment, knowing you're living a virtuous life.
Yes.
That steady, slow burn of, you know what?
Yes.
I'm happy with
Yeah.
I'm
Content.
I'm content and I'm grateful with the way I'm living
I
out my
think
life.
it's a good clarification, because in fact, the word the Quran uses is not happiness. The word the Quran uses is tamatnina, or the idea of tranquility,
Yes, yeah.
solace, having
Yeah.
solace, because it says "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub."
Mm.
That certainly with the remembrance of God, do hearts find rest. It's a restful state. It's a tranquil state. It's a solace that someone gets. It's not necessarily happiness. In fact, I looked at the whole Quran and just thought about thinking about where does the Quran use the word happiness with the human being in this dunya, and I think it's only in the Quran. قل بفضل الله ورحمته وبذلك فليفرحوا وهو خير مما يجمعون. It's chapter 10 of the Quran, Surah Yunus, where it says that say it's with the fadl, or the grace of God and His mercy, i.e. it's better, i.e. the Quran is better than whatever they amass, and they will be happy with it. So Quran is the only thing that the word faraha in the Quran that happiness is there. But generally speaking, you're absolutely right, because happiness is a state, and it's not the end goal for the human condition in the Quran.
You can get happiness from drugs.
You get happiness from drugs.
You cannot get tranquility and fulfillment and heart truly at rest.
Exactly, and that is what we're looking for. But even if we don't get this, I mean, let's even put that to the side and say, if human being is in the most miserable state possible, if they're still doing their purpose, if they're still doing what they should be doing and worshipping God, then they're doing the appropriate action.
This is true meaning. Meaning transcends suffering. If you Viktor Frankl, he wrote a book, Man's Ultimate Search for Meaning, and he was a Holocaust survivor, and he made a beautiful point. He said, you can transcend your suffering with meaning. If you stand in the possibility that the meaning that you're giving this particular suffering is not the only meaning, you can give a more empowering meaning, you would transcend your suffering. And the beautiful thing about the Quran gives you Allah's meaning for your suffering, for your life experience. And once you attach Allah's meaning, you will transcend the life's obstacles. Like the Prophet ﷺ, when his son passed away, Ibrahim passed away, how does Allah respond? With Surah Al-Kawthar. It's not even a divine condolences, bro. It's indeed you have been given Al-Kawthar, the abundance. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْهَرْ. Therefore, pray to your Lord and sacrifice. He changed the prophetic mindset from maybe a depressive state because his son passed away to one of gratitude. And if you're in a state of gratitude, you can't be in any other state. And he was reminding the Prophet ﷺ, I am giving you, and I have given you the abundance in this life and in the hereafter specifically, which we know is the river in paradise, but in these other things as well. So if you give the divine meaning to your life experiences, you would transcend those experiences.
And going back to the point, because so number one is God, but number two is this idea of femininity, masculinity, which has been suppressed. I was just speaking to the boys before this podcast and saying that in the modern age, there's never been an age, I don't think, in human history where a man's natural proclivity to manifest ingrained and imbued, naturally born masculinity has ever been suppressed to this level. Like you were saying, physicality now is toxic. If you want to fight, if you want to protect, if you want to fight, that's toxic. If you want to be polygynous, if you want to have multiple, which is a proclivity which a woman doesn't have, the male sex drive is undoubtedly differentiated from the female sex drive. And it's not just a sex drive. There are so many physiological aspects. If you want to manifest this, you're shamed in society. And that's why a lot of men now are listening to, this is why Andrew Tate is popular. It's because this is what we were trying to say. He's expressing in a normal and eloquent language what they believe in. What they've been suppressed, what they've been shamed for all their lives. And that's why it's a phenomenon. It's not just a person they're talking about here. In the Muslim space and outside of the Muslim space, we're finding a lot of confusion in relationships. Now, without mentioning your past sins or something like this. I mean, you do have experience, obviously, in this field.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going wrong now? First of all, in terms of, we talked about like the gender issues and stuff like that, but is it just that people have become spoilt? Have women become spoilt, for example? Have men become spoilt? Have we lost what it means to have meaningful relationships in the modern era? Or what's going on?
Okay, well, I think the primary problem with modern day relationships is if we're gonna, I think it's men's fault.
Really?
100%. 100%. I think men have forgotten how to lead. I think men have, whether it's their fault or society's programming, they've forgotten what it means to be a man who is worthy of submission from a woman. And I think, again, the idea of accountability, in the same way a lot of women are saying, where have all the good men gone? A lot of men are saying, where have all the good women gone? If you build yourself into a man with enough capability and value and experience, you will be able to find good women. Wallahi, trust me. They exist. I mean, of course they do. But I think the phenomena of the red pill, I went through a 9-year marriage that was very much blue pill. So I was doing what society told me. I was essentially getting exploited and walked over. And indeed, so are all the men in my social circles. Like, a lot of people think golf is about golf. No, it's not. It's about men whinging about how miserable they are with their wives.
Really?
That's what golf is.
I was always wondering why people play that sport.
No, it's just so they can. Well,
Is it even a sport?
It's somewhere where you can have private chats to complain about when was the last time you had a fulfilling bedroom moment with the woman that you're paying everything for. That pretty much sums up golf. So I think as a result of the imbalance of traditional gender norms, most marriages in the West are very confused, and it's a competition. It's not man does man, woman does woman. They work together as a team, which is where fulfillment is. It's we're going to compete, and we're all going to try and do what the other one should do, and everyone should do everything 50-50. It doesn't work, and I'd love to see any couple living true to that modern day version of a relationship who are having strong intimacy. Show me a liberal couple where everything's 50-50. Everyone's doing 50% of the housework. Everyone's cutting the bill in half, 50%, who are still passionately in love with each other and having that strong physical passion after a couple of years.
Do you know what you're saying is so interesting? Do you know why? I was reading a book, I think I mentioned it before we started this podcast, A Billion Wicked Thoughts, which talks about like the sexual preferences of people. And in fact, they've tabulated it. They've got like these online things where people watch and so on, pornography and all kinds of anecdotal experiences and questions and all that kind of thing, men and women. And one thing is for sure, what women are interested in is dominating alpha-type male figures sexually. In fact, the question is...
Good luck.
No, I mean, because for people that will challenge you, say, actually, what you're talking about it's not research-based. It's not just something, some anecdote or some opinion, some take of some... Actually, it's backed. What he's saying is backed. Because when you find, like, for example, 50 Shades of Grey, one of these,
most popular book of the last decade.
You see what I mean? And it's mostly the readership is women. You'll find that women are actually interested, mostly, or the scenario, the fantasy is about a man that's domineering. Why is it not a blue-haired transgender? Sorry to say, Yanni. I mean, Yanni, why is it not? Why is it when you put in your sexual fantasy a blue-haired transgender? Why doesn't he become the star of 50 Shades of Grey?
I'm laughing so much I'm sweating, bro.
No, but the reason, that's the question. The reason is because what he's saying seems to be the most reasonable reason is that there is a biological proclivity and natural inclination for a woman to be dominated in a certain manner, sexually and otherwise.
I'd love to break that down, if I can.
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
So I think there's
because I think you're going to offer insights we all need to hear.
I mean, again, I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but in terms of intimacy, as we know from 50 Shades of Grey, women want a dominant man. Now, I've often thought, and again, without talking about specifics, 50 Shades of Grey involves a lot of BDSM type stuff. A lot of women are into that sort of thing. Now, you have to ask yourself, why would a woman be into that sort of thing? I believe it's because if they are confronted with and they experience the strength and the power of the man they're being intimate with, they therefore feel this is a strong man who can protect me. They also think, he has that alpha seed that's then going to give me the strong kids, so I'm going to have the healthy kids, again, who can go on and protect me and continue the lineage. So I think on a deep psychological level, the urge, if you will, to be dominated or to be with a dominant man ties into both self-preservation, survival, because again, nowadays we have police, women have jobs. Back in the day, as a woman, a couple 100 years ago, if you weren't protected by a man, you wouldn't survive. So,
okay, can I ask a question on this? Now, my curious side is coming out. one of the categories that women really liked is lesbian pornography, for example. Even heterosexual women. What do you think the reason? Because then someone will say this is kind of like counter to what you're saying. I mean, you're saying BDSM, okay, that's one category that they're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But one category, another category, even heterosexual women is lesbian category. And some people have said that is the reason why is because of the exact opposite reason of what you're mentioning, which is that in fact a woman knows what a woman wants. She likes the sensual aspect. She likes the romantic aspect.
Mm-hmm.
She likes to be, seduced slowly and these kinds of things. How would you respond to that? How does that fit in with what you're saying?
I think it ties in the fact that women are objectively more beautiful than men.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most beautiful feminine form will get a lot more attention from both sexes than the most beautiful masculine form walking down the street. I think I'd put it as simple as that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just think women are, if we break it down, women are, throughout history, their beauty has been spoken about.
Yes.
That's been an overarching standout in myths and in legends. You know, the princesses are always beautiful, right? Whereas in myths and in legends, look, he might have nice flowing hair as per some of the Greek classics, but his defining feature isn't his beauty; it's his capability, it's his character. It's, if anything, throughout the various myths, it's his dominance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're archetypal. I think women are valued more throughout history for beauty and femininity and grace. Men are valued for capability and dominance and character. So that's why I put that into that. But
because this is interesting because one of the categories that women were not interested in is humiliating men. Like men might be interested in that.
I can speak to
Funny enough, I mean, one of the chapters of this book was that men like cockholding, or what they call it.
Please let's not.
Sorry to say, but
But you know, on the whole lesbian issue,
yeah.
Don't you think is what they were doing that is also important? Because a lot of people sometimes.
Can we not, guys? Can we
No. Not in I'm not saying in detail. But I'm saying it might not be the objectivity of a female beauty, but it could be that there were certain sexual practices that in maybe certain cultures they don't like to do.
No, but don't forget this is even in the West.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think women are more sensual as well. They're more in touch with emotion. They're more empathetic. A woman as a sexual object is going to be more attentive, generally speaking, to a partner's needs than a man. And I can see why some women would be drawn to the idea of other women as a result. That just logically makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. But if we can move away from that, if that's all right. Sure. Just going back to the relationships and to your question, I think, well, first of all, a woman's sexuality is a chapter of books. A man's sexuality is visual stimulation and friction. We are much simpler as creatures. So if we wanted to discuss female sexuality, that could be a series of podcasts.
Sure.
But I think to look at it from the sort of holistic level, I think the reason why relationships are, especially in the West, so upside down is they are, to use the term, they are very blue pill. It's societal driven. And as per society's norms, hey, happy wife, happy life. You should do everything you can to make your wife happy. The problem is, when you set the dynamic where you are inferior to her and you're doing everything to please her, she'll no longer respect you, she'll become ungrateful, and we know where that relationship ends. I think it's up to a man to understand some basic facts when he gets into a relationship. Number one, every woman has the propensity to be either an amazing, caring, submissive wife or an ungrateful, overbearing, rude wife. And it comes down to you as the man and the frame you set as to which path she takes. Now, if we look at things, as I said earlier, in terms of basic survival, hundreds of years ago, a woman needed to take from a man, take his protection, take his provisioning, take his resources in order to survive. They couldn't go out hunting by themselves. Men did that. We can agree on that. So if we flash forward to today, again, even though women don't need men's resources and they don't need men's protection, on the deep hindbrain level, the reptilian brain level, they are still biologically and throughout human history programmed to take from a man. So what does that mean? Yes, give to your woman. Yes, be caring. But watch out for that ingratitude creeping in. And indeed, the Quran speaks about the fact that we don't even need to gender it. The majority of people in hell, in Jahannam, are ungrateful. And women, again, as a function of their need to survive throughout history, have a proclivity, have a tendency to become ungrateful if not managed. And I see a lot of wealthy guys, their relationship starts off nice. 5 years later, he hasn't held frame. All of a sudden, she's incredibly ungrateful. He'll give her an $80,000, $20,000, 80,000 dirham bag, and she's like, it just doesn't register anymore. And that's why, as the man, you need to understand that these tendencies exist, and you need to set the frame very carefully. Now, what I've seen again, sort of standard relationship again in the West, woman sees strong man. Woman says, I'm going to lock this man down. He's attractive to all sorts of different women, but I want him to only be with me. I love the fact that he's highly desirable, but I want him to only be with me. It's a bit strange, and Islam has a solution for that, of course. He is strong and he's fit and he's busy. I don't want him to do that. I'm going to chip away at his mates. He hasn't got enough time for his friends anymore. He's going to look after me. I don't want him going out to the gym. He needs to be around here. The red pill theory summed it up pretty well. They call it the betatization by 1,000 concessions. And that's where you see the power balance change, and all of a sudden, the man is basically doing what the woman says. But the problem here is she resents him. And then the entire relationship, the sex fades, everything. If you do not lead as the man, and if you do not reject that modern societal programming, hold masculine frame, we'll talk about how to do that, your relationship will end up such that your woman is resenting you and she is ungrateful. The flip side is, if you start a relationship, and I think even in the Muslim community, I know that we're encouraged to marry young, and I see the virtue in that. However, I do know the most successful relationships I know are second marriages, when a man's gone through, made mistakes, and then got another marriage. That's where I came from. And indeed, red pill theory helped me get out of that very toxic marriage and go and create, more healthy understanding of how to interact with women. But if at the start of the relationship you say, and you can even write it down, this is what I expect of you, and also this is what I'll deliver. And the woman writes, this is what I expect of you, and this is what I'll deliver. I understand Islam does that as well. That setting that expectations very clearly at the start, and then maintaining it throughout is the key for a man to hold frame. And also, I know people might object to this term, but it's almost like there's a bit of a training phase. And you can say both partners are doing it. You've said your expectations are X, Y, Z. I've said my expectations are X, Y, Z. On this day or at this moment, you're not fulfilling those expectations. As a man, I think you will then, again, as the one who holds the masculine frame of the household, you will need to continually, especially at the start of the relationship, catch behavior that has not met expectations and find a way to respond to that, should we say, trains or teaches or encourages your partner to act in a way that is healthy for the relationship. The number one tool that we have is to take away our attention. And indeed, the Prophet, ﷺ, he went away for 29 days because he said, you know what? You're not treating me right. I'm going to take my attention away. Now, this is where the problem of men's sexual thirst comes in. A lot of, I do believe, so set the expectations. If your wife does not treat you with respect or does not stick to the agreements as to how you should interact in a healthy manner, withdraw yourself. But then men will say, oh, but I need sex.
That's right.
And my question to that is, where is that thirst coming from? Is it a physical thirst or is it a mental thirst?
Very interesting.
If it's a physical thirst, you mean to tell me, as a man, you cannot control your urges and feel yourself get more pumped up as the days go on. I like holding on to that sexual energy. I'm harder in the gym. I'm training. I'm more focused at work. Keeping your sexual energy and not pushing it out every day makes you more driven, more focused, more masculine because it's power, it's energy, right? Yes. So the physical thirst. Grow up. You do not need a woman to satiate you physically. You do not need to express. You don't need to come every day. Let yourself build up and focus on your mission instead. But then we look at the mental thirst, and this is where most men, their lives absolutely are disrupted.
Wow, man.
The mental thirst is, my mum didn't give me the validation I want, and now in the modern, say again.
Or that maybe as well.
Typically speaking, when it comes to interactions with wives, that will stem from your childhood issues that you had with your mum, with the feminine. The main feminine influence in your life as you're growing up. A lot of men, they didn't get whether it's the attention or the validation they wanted from their mum, so they're chasing it in women. Or there's the whole, hey, if I can impress a woman, therefore I'm worthy. This sort of petty stuff. But again, culture imbues that in a man. I remember just the other day, I put on Spotify, actually this is before Shahada, I put on Spotify, it was the gym playlist. After 5 songs, I had to turn it off because every single song was, oh baby, I'm lost without you. Oh darling, give me another chance. In the gym playlist.
Rubbish.
I can't even go to the gym without being fed this mental thirst. It's being programmed into men. So I think,
honestly,
men need to get over, control your physical thirst, channel it into other areas. Yeah. Get over the mental thirst, examine why you are seeking validation from women, and therefore, you do not have a woman's ability to give you sex over you. Personally, in my current relationships, any issues, I'll hold frame such that even a raised eyebrow, I feel disrespected. We've agreed at the start of the relationship that respect is very important to me. I'm not going to be intimate with you for 72 hours. I will enact a sex fast.
Yes.
Because I do not have any physical thirst. All right, I'll go to the gym more. I'll do more push-ups. Mental thirst. I do not get validation from women. I get validation from higher places, from brotherhood, from work. Yeah. If you can free yourself from that, oh, but I need to be on good terms with her so I can have sex, you are then in a much better position to hold frame. And again, if you do not hold frame, after 5 years, she'll become ungrateful. The passion will be gone. She will not respect you. A woman is happiest when she is with a man she can look up to and respect and think, that man is my hero. That is when a woman is happiest. A man is happiest when he is focused on his mission and he's holding frame and he's respected. That line, a man must feel respected before he can feel loved, is very important. And for me, I said at the start of the relationships, I will say, I have said, I will not tolerate any ingratitude. I will not tolerate any disrespect. Mm-hmm. Even a facial expression that shows disrespect, there will be I don't even like to use the word consequence. It sounds like you're punishing. I'm not punishing. I'm teaching you. Yes. If you want to have a loving, intimate relationship, I expect certain things per the agreement at the start. And so every man should have his self-control and his self-awareness together such that he can say, we're not going to be intimate now. And it's the woman who's left thinking, oh, that's the dynamic you want. The healthy dynamic is when a woman wants intimacy more than a man. And you can set that up if you get rid of your thirst. You learn to channel your physical thirst and release your mental thirst.
I'll be honest with you. This is golden information, by the way. It's fantastic. And especially, I think, with Muslim men, I'll be honest. I mean, a Superdrug is a pharmacy in England, but they also do studies and stuff. They done a study on sexual body counts of the average person at the age of 21. Okay. And in England, the average number for a male is 9.5 by the age of 21. Okay. Now, in the Muslim
seems like a lot.
It seems like a lot, but if you say the Muslim community, I'd probably bet it's either 0 or 1 at the maximum. Now, what that does for a Muslim man, and this is why I want to get your kind of advice here, because Muslim men don't have the experience with a lot of women. Pound for pound, comparative to their kind of, co-equal or whatever. Maybe it's different because, you read about something, you guys are, in a sense, you have an advantage, but in a sense, I don't know if it's a disadvantage. You can tell me, but
we learn from we have the opportunity to learn from mistakes.
Yes.
I think if you marry young, perhaps you don't.
No, because that's number one. You're usually with one woman, and a lot of them are one woman all their lives. And for the most part, the Muslim woman is gonna be very, very against the idea of polygamy. And she might even weaponize the children. She might even do this. She might even engage in some of those actions that the majority of the population are doing. Right? Not all of them, to be fair, but a lot of them will do this kind of thing. As such, what you're talking about, the sexual thirst, the neediness for the woman.
Yeah, they're setting expectations clearly at the start.
Yeah, all of that kind of thing kind of fades away, and a lot of men actually said this to me. Like, honestly, what I say, I find it. I know the Quran says, because what you're saying is in line with the Quran. وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. Leave them in the bed. That's stage 2 in chapter 4, verse 34. And وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِمْ تَرَبَّصُوا أَرْبَعَةِ أَشْهُرٍ. That those who leave their wives sexual fast, whatever. But it's not just sexual fast. Sometimes
it's attention. It's attention fast.
Yeah.
You've just done something that's disrespected me as your man. I work very hard to provide this reality.
Exactly.
As you've just disrespected me, and I want you to learn not to disrespect me. We're not going to, and it's not passive aggressive. You just withdraw your attention.
And Islam allows you up to 4 months for that. People don't even know that. It's called al-ilat.
Well, you've drawn your red lines.
No, but it's
you must.
Which means that
of course, because the whole point.
What I mean is like, so for example, if obviously you could. I'll be honest, like someone raised the eyebrow and you go for 4 months, that would be an extreme reaction. But I'm saying, for instance, if she done something pretty significant, let's say, disrespected your mother, disrespected you in front of people, whatever it may be, right? And you decide, I'm not going to be here for the next 90 days. That's actually within your right, Islamically speaking. For example, what you just mentioned here is it's an Islamic right. It's in the Quran itself.
I think 2 days is enough, but I mean 90 if you want to.
No, it's up to 4 months. The Quran's saying don't go over 4 months, for example.
Yeah, you have the maximum.
And the Prophet did it with 29 days. I mean, that's one thing. The other thing which I found so powerful about what you said, because it so strongly correlates with the Seerah, there's one thing people don't realize is that the Prophet actually gave all of 9 wives at the same time. He gave them something called khiyar. And it's in the Quran, إِن كُنْتُنَّ تُرِدْنَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. So chapter 33 of the Quran. إِن كُنْتُنَّ تُرِدْنَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَزِينَتَهَا فَتَعَالَيْنَ وَمَتَّعْكُنَّ وَأَسَرَّحْكُنَّ سَرَاحًا جَمِيلًا. If you want, because they were complaining about the living situation, because the Prophet ﷺ, for a point in time, lived in impoverished conditions. His wife said that he's only eating dates and drinking water. And this is the kind of thing we had. So they were complaining about the living situation. So then this situation took place where he separated from them for a long time. And then this verse came down, which is, if this is a conditional that is set to the Prophet's wives, if you want the adornment of this life, or this life and its adornment, then come and I'll let you go. Now, what people don't realize is that this was actually binding. If any one of his 9 wives at any point said, "I don't want to be with you anymore," it would have been effective, and they would not have been, punished in a punitive way. In other words, he actually, the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ gave them the right to leave if they wanted to.
Can I just jump in there? Please keep your flow going. That is incredible, because one of the important parts of keeping that masculine frame for the overall health of the relationship is, as the man, you should always be ready to say, "No, we're done." You have to. You cannot be thirsty. No, okay, you disrespected me, but I'm going to keep you next to me. No, you cross certain lines, we're finished. There's no hard feelings. I'm not going to be nasty. I'll take care of you financially per the contract that we've engaged in. But even, like, no matter how much you love a woman, if she crosses certain lines and doesn't respond to your request for her not to stop them, you need to be okay to walk away. And that's where a lot of men make mistakes. Yes. They're thirsty for sex. They're thirsty for approval. Oh, she disrespected me. Oh, but she... The amount of guys, I've been in very high-end dinners, and their own wives have disrespected them openly in front of a group of people. I'm like, bruv, it's your house. Ask her to leave. These men forget that they have the right to request respectful treatment from their partner. And if you don't get that, you need to be ready to walk away instantly.
Yes.
But again, men are so thirsty nowadays, again, because of that blue pill programming, that they don't know how to hold frame.
And what you're saying is that it's ironic that that's the case, because that actually puts them off the man. And I was actually reading a study 3 days ago. I don't know why I was reading the study. It's I can get you the name of it. I've got it on my phone, but it's basically the top reasons why people get divorced. And the people of the study mentioned 12 reasons. One of them was extreme clinginess.
Neediness, thirst.
Yeah, they refer to it as clinginess, and I said that's one of the reasons why people get divorced, because when a man is clingy, it's one of the worst characteristics. It shows all the wrong signs to the woman.
Yes,
and that's why I think polygamy, in a sense, can actually save marriages.
Before we get to polygamy, I just want to make 2 points very quickly. The first point is the reference that you made about the ingratitude in hell. It's the hadith, not the Quran, just for people to know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The second thing that's important as well is, and this is my view, is that this conversation shows that we don't need a movement outside of Islam to teach us how to have a good, healthy marriage.
Exactly.
We don't need red pill, we don't need blue pill, we don't need green pill. We just need Islam and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Can't we say that Islam is the green pill?
Yeah, you can say that. If you want.
I like that phrase.
There's a really nice brother in Canada who's got this green pill thing going on, and he shows from the Quran and the Sunnah how to be and have prophetic masculinity. So to use green pill is not a problem. But my worry is I don't want people watching this now going all the way to the red pill movement, because there may be some good things, but there's other blameworthy things.
The red pill can help you see what's wrong in your relationship, but it has zero answers.
Good.
And just like we're talking about the fact that the idea of the sex fast, or the idea of how to have a clear expectation relationship, that's Islamic.
100%.
So you can say, yeah.
And this is
Peel et al. This is the name of the study, where they refer to as partner pursuit, basically. If you keep pursuing.
So it's very good we made that clarification that Islam has a solution to this dynamic between the male and the female. So you were talking about polygamy, bro.
Sometimes, because it's such an unexplored option for Western Muslim people, polygamy. For the majority of the population, it's completely unexplored. And a man would be happier to get a divorce than he would to do polygamy, because the woman has set the conditions for him that if you do this is going to happen.
See, I really don't understand that, in that if a woman truly loves her man and truly trusts him and truly wants him to be happy, can she not understand that he has a natural, strong urge for sexual variety at a very deep level, and that there is a safe, respectful, halal way with which to pursue that, if he is at the standing where he is able to provide for multiple families, not just financially, that's the easy part, but in terms of time, care, empathy, family leadership. I don't understand why it's so hard for women to understand that. I mean, look, I didn't choose to need sexual variety or to want it so badly. It's in me. And if anything, if I could turn off the need for sexual variety, wouldn't it be easier? If you could have one woman and genuinely feel, you know what, this is enough for me, wouldn't that make all of our lives easier? However, the reality is, if you only are intimate with one woman as a man, over time, even if she's the best woman in the world, you will start to feel the need for something else.
Absolutely.
And also, as we know, if you do have multiple women in a halal way, you will have higher testosterone. Yes. You will put more energy into I've got multiple families to look after, I need to be the man. To me, it's natural. I don't know why it's demonized.
What you're saying is backed by science, it's backed by psychology. Probably one of the biggest studies that have been done, Baumeister and Cantonese, and they did actually compare the sex drive of a man and a woman, and they refer to the sex drive in the way that you have, which is not just the frequency of sexual experience, it's the variety of it. Because I was thinking about this, I was speaking to the guys about this as well. Don't ask me why I keep saying this, but I was speaking because in a sense, a Muslim man, for example, we're talking about the community, maybe a Jewish man as well, a lot of religious people, the same thing would apply. He may have more sex than the average Western person. Why? Because at least if he's got one person, he's having sex with her maybe every day or every other day or 3 times a week or whatever it may be, right? Depending on the age and the experience. But he doesn't have as much variety. So in one way, the average Western man, although maybe he's got like 3 sexual partners in a year, there's a long distance between one and the next one because he has to find her in the club or whatever. I remember my friends used to tell me, maybe if you're a high level guy, high value or whatever it may be, but for the average guy, he's going to have to work his game in order to get one woman and the second and the third, and there may be long periods of drought in between, for example. The Muslim man has sex every day, but with the same woman. In one way, this guy is sexually frustrated. In another way, this other guy is sexually frustrated. The average Muslim man is sexually frustrated on one level, and the average, let's say, Western man is sexually frustrated on another level.
Yes. One's variety, one's access in the first place.
Basically. Yeah. And so I feel like this is an important point because when you're talking about we didn't choose to feel like this. There is evidence to show that the male sex drive, the man wants to have more sex and with more different kind of women.
I just want to say something on that. If you have your relationship dynamic set in the way that is optimal, your woman will want to have sex with you more than you want to have with her. Yes. Without question. And that's why all these men who are like, my woman is not okay with me having multiple, or, she's not attracted to me. If you really do develop yourself as a man in all areas of life, if you chase excellence, and then you start a relationship with very clear guidelines and you hold that frame, your woman will want you more than you want her. Now, if you've set the dynamic up in a way and you haven't held frame, I don't think you can re-engineer it. You can't negotiate real, pure passion. It's not, you can, hey, you should want me more. Oh, but it doesn't work like that. But if you have really pursued excellence as a man, and to the point where you can look after multiple families, your wives will want you a lot more than you can handle.
That's a question. This might be a little personal, but still for the sake of, we don't get the opportunity to do so. I mean, you guys all were one group. You, Andrew, and Tristan, all of you guys. From my understanding, and this might be flawed or correct me, you all did have polygynous relationships, at one point before becoming Muslims. Is this, first of all, is this correct? Or?
After I got divorced, I was... I was not lacking in variety. Let's put it that way.
But were there romantic relationships?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So they were romantic and obviously intimate at the same time. Okay, to ask it bluntly, because these women are not incentivized by the religious incentive, let's say. How did you do it?
Okay, so I'm glad you
asked
this.
Did they ever object?
So I'm glad you asked this. Yes. So when a man in the West is dating multiple women, unless these women are a bit deranged, I'd say. Each one, say he has 3 concurrent girlfriends.
Yes.
Each one of these girlfriends is hoping and in some way believing she will one day become his one girlfriend.
Okay.
And this is why I strongly believe that men as well should not engage in dating culture. We know, look, if a woman sleeps with a lot of men, that's damaging for the woman. We know that, of course. I don't think it's necessarily damaging for the man to sleep with a lot of women, but it is a waste of potential. Again, that energy, you can put it into more meaningful things.
Yes.
The more you go out and sleep with a woman who at some point is thinking, oh, I know he has other girls, but I still have a chance to lock him down. If you don't have the intent to take care of a woman, I do not believe you should sleep with her. Because I think you are damaging her potential future fulfillment in relationship.
Right.
And that's why numerous times look, whether it's Instagram or whatever, I've had good women, beautiful women, show an interest in me. I do not engage. Because I know I don't have any intent to take care of you. And if you hook up with me, I'm going to ruin your life. You'll have a certain lifestyle. You have a certain level of intensity in the bedroom.
That's a very honourable thing, to be honest.
But generally, I don't want to. If I'm going to be intimate with someone, I don't want to ruin their lives. To the point where once I'm done with you, you then need to go out and find a good man in a world where there aren't many good men, and you'll always be bitter. Now that I don't engage with her, maybe she'll go and find a man she'll have a happy family with. So all these men, these high-level men who are just chewing through the girls and don't have any intention to take care of them in a halal fashion. I think it's very damaging for the women, and hence the men shouldn't be doing it. They should take some responsibility.
There are studies to this effect. I looked at the study of casual sex on both men and women, and women that do engage in casual sex, they are harmed on a variety of different metrics.
And so therefore it's unethical of the men to have sex with lots of women. I really think it's I remember seeing a scholar a while ago, a very outspoken scholar, saying, if you want to have sex with multiple women, you should take care of them. If you want to lie with her, you should marry her. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yes.
Because anything else is unethical.
Yeah. Can I run something past you? You mentioned a very profound point about if a woman really loves her man, then this polygamy issue shouldn't be a problem.
Loves and trusts.
Yeah. So I have a theory. Right? There's a Korean-born German philosopher. He's seen as like one of the greatest philosophers of our era. His name is Byung-Chul Han. He wrote the book, The Agony of Eros and the Disappearance of Other, I think.
Yeah.
He's got a beautiful theory, and he links it to the liberal world order, which links to the stuff that we talk about Andrew Tate and everything else, right? So the liberal world order creates this sense of narcissism. We don't know how to love anymore. Because what happens is, to love someone, you have to be committed to the well-being and guidance of that particular person, the other in their context. But because we live in a narcissistic society, there is a disappearance of the other. So now, what you do, because we have this collective narcissism, we are now projecting ourselves on the other, and we're not loving the other in the individuality and context, we're just loving ourselves. So our women folk, generally speaking, happens to the men folk as well, but in the context of polygamy, our women folk are part of this secular neoliberal world order, where really love is not loving the other in their context, the man who has needs to have another wife, another sexual partner. They've dismissed that other, that individual, that context, and they've just projected themselves, and they end up just loving themselves. So really, and this is quite controversial, right?
Yeah.
Not allowing your husband within the halal context with all the stuff in place to have another wife, yes, there's going to be jealousy and this and the other, is actually a manifestation of not knowing how to love.
And I'd love to add on to
You see
that.
the point?
Yeah. I'd love those words, if said to a woman, you'd think would help her be open to polygyny? Nah, zero.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you do that?
In theory, if I was to, I'd approach it such that, again, again, we're being very simplified here, but we can sit there logically and say, you know what, that makes sense, so it should be so. A woman could agree logically, but she won't feel in her heart that it should be so. Any man who wants his, in an Islamic setting, who wants his woman to be open to polygyny, if she's not, it's on you to build that trust, to show that you're capable enough, to let her know that she will always be looked after and loved, and she'll always be your first wife, your queen, so to speak. The responsibility is on you, on the man, to do better, not to try and convince her or whinge at her or argue with her to be open to polygyny. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is enrolling in your behavior. It's a prophetic trait. To the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted the companions to shave their heads. They were a bit upset about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. They didn't see the kind of maximum wisdom behind it. And the Prophet went to his wife, Salama, radiallahu anha, and he wanted advice. And she advised him, if you want them to shave their heads, you shave your head. So he shaved his head, and automatically they followed. This is a prophetic principle of enrolling, not necessarily controlling. So you enroll people in your behavior. So that's what I'm getting from you. Like, you need to be in a state of being that would basically result in what you want.
And I think it might take time. I think you will probably have to be with one wife for long enough for her to trust you before you can then say, I would like to pursue this urge that I have, which ties into my fulfillment.
Some people say the opposite. Some people say if you want to get it done, you've got to get used to it from the beginning.
I think it would be good. I think it would be good.
You're like a kid in a candy shop.
Okay, to that, again, what did we talk about? We talked about going to a relationship with clear expectations. Yeah. If you at some point aim to have your life in order such that you can have multiple wives, I think you should tell any woman who comes to you for potential marriage that that's your intent.
Yeah.
And if you've said that from the start, she'll probably say, oh, I don't want that. You could say, well, if we're going to go ahead, you need to be open to that when the time is right and when you trust me. And again, if she says, oh, no, I don't want that, well, then we're not getting married then.
Yes.
This is what I mean by this very clear expectations at the start and then holding flame. Even if she trusts you, even if you said at the outset from the start, I'm going to have multiple wives at some point, you as a man, you're still going to face a very drawn-out challenge to reassure her that she's safe. I don't think women are necessarily jealous about the idea of you being intimate with someone else. They are afraid, and rightly so, that you may fall out of love with them and focus more on someone else. Yeah. So you need to show her over time, you're not the sort of guy who's thirsty. You're not going to get caught up on some, oh, look, there's a attractive pair of whatever there.
Yeah, yeah.
You were loyal to your first wife, and you were enough of a man with enough resources and leadership and time to take care of another family.
Mm.
But the onus is on you as a man to show her over time that you're not going to get caught up in something else. You'll never love her less. That's the key thing. I don't think women are naturally that jealous about the idea of a man being purely sexually with another woman. And a good example is,
Yes.
a lot of times, a woman will find out that her husband, for example, in the West, on a business trip, had sex with a prostitute. That hurts less than if she finds out he's had an emotional affair with his secretary.
What you're saying is true, because I actually read a study to that effect.
Oh, here we go.
You've been reading a lot of studies like this.
No, honestly, because I was reading, there's a book called Miseducation of Women by James Tooley. Very good book on this subject. And they done a jealousy study, I think it was in Japan. And they checked out the patterns of jealousy for males and females. And what he says is actually true. What they found, the majority of participants, males, actually were the opposite. If they find that their woman loves another man, according to the study, they're less jealous about it, quote unquote, than a woman. But the opposite is true for the woman. So in other words, the intimacy for the woman is less problematic than the love.
Yeah.
If she knows that he loves a woman more than he loves her, or in addition to loving her, it's more problematic than him being intimate with another woman, like you just said, because it's whatever reason, yani. But
the reason is clear. Again, women need on a very deep level to feel protected, to feel cared for. Because again, a couple of 100 years ago, if a man fell out of love with them, they could die. They relied on a man's protection and provisioning to stay alive. And in the deep, dark brain, they still correlate with that man. My man doesn't love me anymore. Oops, I could die. In the reptilian brain.
Sure.
So it's up to you as a man to be of such virtuous character and such stoicism and such clarity of mind that I could never fall out of love with you because of something new. This is simply going to make me more fulfilled as a man. You will not see a difference in our intimacy and our love. And if anything, and a friend told me that when there are multiple wives, the fact that there is a few days where he's not around and then he's back brings a bit more spice into the relationship and actually is the natural order of things anyway.
Sure.
If we look at the fact that men are designed to spread their seed and that we can do our part, the insemination multiple times a day, it takes 9 months for a woman to do her part. On an animal level, we are wired for polygyny.
Yes.
Women are wired to be loyal to one man who protects, provides, and so on. If a woman goes and has a bunch of sexual partners, again, speaking in the historical concept, and paternity isn't known, she's at risk of getting kicked out of the tribe and no one looking after her. Like, it's deep brain stuff. It's very simple.
Another thing, which is a very simple thing, a friend of mine just said it to me the other day, is that if I was caught a friend of her, it shows how often we've been speaking about this matter outside of the cameras. But if women try to be equal with men in this regard, men will be killing each other on the streets. At the end of the day, as we've just said, the jealousy on the intimacy issue is so high for men, then it would lead to murder. Imagine if you know that a woman has done such a thing with another man, for example. Sure. It would lead to a murder. The same is not true with women, because women don't show aggressivity in the same way. They show aggressivity in a passive manner. There's studies to that effect. But what I found really interesting is we were speaking, I was having a discussion with a few students of knowledge and so on about, we tried to bring all the instances where the Prophet had an argument with his wives, any of his wives. And it was so interesting because there are times where the Prophet ﷺ, let me give you one example, right? And I was looking at this hadith and I was thinking about it and really pondering over it. There was one particular hadith that the Prophet ﷺ left a prisoner of war in the house where Aisha was. And he left. And he said, look after the prisoner of war. And he left and he came back. And she was with her friends that were females, and the prisoner of war ran away. So he, in anger to her, said, Qata Allahu yadik, which is like an Arabic expression, means, may Allah cut your hand. And he tried to look for the prisoner of war. They found the prisoner of war. They came back, and she was looking at her hands because she took it literally, so she thought her hands would be cut. He said, Habilti, have you become, are you mad? Like, this is just like an expression. And then he said to her, which is very interesting, because it shows the other side of the Prophet's character as well. He said to her, Ana aghdabu kama yaghdab al-bashar. I get angry like men get angry. And that he also said to her that whoever I've made dua against, whoever I've made supplication against, that make it into basically a blessing. So in other words, you can see the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, it wasn't a false macho-ness. It was all action. And he wasn't afraid to be concessionary with his wives. He was concessionary with all of them. You know,
And I like also, if you don't mind, the way he sought advice, especially from Aisha.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say after I say Aisha. What do I say?
رضي الله عنها. رضي الله
Radiya Allahu
عنها.
anha.
May
Thank
Allah
you.
be pleased with her.
Perfect. Still getting there.
You
Thank
said
you,
that
guys.
quite quickly, man.
Thank you, man. Oh, I do love the Arabic language. It's a beautiful thing. I'll get there. The way you guys quote scriptures, Hadith, Quran, with such ease, give me a couple of years, inshallah. I view that.
I reckon you do it in 6 months.
I see the work, but the work that's gone in that is incredible, man. Like that's I don't have status goals or money goals. I want to be able to quote the Quran with ease goals. Like I'm really working
What the
towards
Quran
it.
says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made the Quran easy for remembrance, so who's going to remember it? And so it's Allah has facilitated it. You've got kids doing it, and the reason why is because Allah has. It's a miracle in itself how Allah done that.
There's so much intelligence. There's so much depth. You can spend your whole life on it and still know nothing. It's amazing. But to come back to our point, the way the Prophet, from what I've read, the Prophet ﷺ viewed relationships in the way that is very different to relationships in the West. A lot of the time in dating culture or in these transactional, narcissistic relationships we see in the West, it's competitive or it's, there's no genuine collaboration. For me, as a man who's leading the family, the health and the beauty and the fulfillment of your woman, I think, is the biggest status that you can have. Because if your woman is genuinely fulfilled, she feels safe, she's comfortable being feminine, she has work that she finds satisfying but doesn't detract from her being able to look after you and the family, she gets more beautiful, more healthy every day, that to me is a sign of a healthy relationship. And I can see that in the Islamic context, we view our wife is essentially, or wives are our assets. They're genuinely our assets. We can seek advice from them. They can create a safe space for us.
Of course, you don't mean they own you. We own them. Like
no. I mean, okay, in a partnership fashion.
Yeah,
you're right.
And I think the West has forgotten that. A lot of the time, men are trying to, I was with this woman, then I got sick of her, and this is. If you really love a woman and you're putting all this energy into finding harmony and setting expectations and learning to work together and holding frame, every time you hold frame with a woman, you are showing her what you expect for the healthy relationship. You're putting years of work. She should become more healthy, more fulfilled, more beautiful, more submissive over time. That should be the goal. I really see a lot of dating culture, a lot of high status guys. It's almost like they're viewing women as just amusement or as a pastime. If you love a woman, her well-being is an extension of your well-being.
Absolutely.
And you 100% should view it as such that every time you hold frame, every time you talk about your expectations, every time you go on a sex fast, that's to make your relationship healthier, to then make her happier, healthier, more submissive, more beautiful.
Yes.
And so, guys, I see so many guys, they're chasing status in terms of, I've got a big car collection, or I've got nice watches. Your biggest status as a man is the health and happiness and fulfillment and submissiveness and femininity and loyalty of your wives.
This is so beautiful.
That's the real flex.
The person once said, the best amongst you are those who are the best to their wives.
See, this is what I mean. And this is what I mean by the green pill. It has it all there written. It's amazing.
I'm really inspired, moved and inspired by your articulation of these things. And it's encompassed by that prophetic statement.
What he was saying as well about, we know that you'll probably know this better than I do. The famous study of Harvard, the longitudinal study was talking about human happiness. Or
Relationships.
It's all about relationships. And they said they tried to track what it is.
It wasn't money, it wasn't health. The number one thing was your relationships.
So true. With men and women.
Yeah.
It's not about the boat, it's about who's on the boat.
And the beautiful thing about Islam is
Waller.
your number one relationship is your relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, true.
And after that, really is your relationship with your spouse. Because that relationship is not broken in the akhirah. It's actually a really deep, very powerful relationship. So what you said about, the green pill, these are prophetic values, prophetic characteristics, prophetic qualities that we want essentially, the prophetic quality is that you're committed to the well-being and the goodness of all people. In the context of marriage, you're committed to the well-being and the goodness of your spouse, your wife.
And it's not a competition, it's collaborative. Like, the West is so broken.
It's complementarian, as you say.
Yeah, there it is. That's the word. That's the magic. Yeah.
And that's what the Quran states. I mean, that you are a garment for them and they are a garment for you. That's the Quran.
It's written.
It's beautiful imagery as well.
It's a garment for, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, that certainly men are the twin halves of women. In other words, it's more of a collaborative relationship. It's complementary.
What does Allah say about the marriage itself? That it's for sakina. Allah
Yes.
says in the 31st chapter
وجعل
of the Quran,
faith, yeah.
What's the key?
وجعل
the
بينهم.
sakina, tranquility, is for you to dwell in tranquility. And Allah has put rahmah, mercy, and muwadda, love in your hearts.
That's right.
So that's the kind of the maqsad, the
But do you know
goal
what
of
he-
marriage.
one
of
thing
tranquility.
I love it.
Just
As per the green pill.
One thing that he said, which is really powerful, and I was actually thinking about this ayah the other day, so to tell that. But before I mention the ayah, I want to mention what he said, because he mentioned that you've got to be willing to walk away. And the reason why the blue pill mentality, whatever you want to call it, is actually there, in my opinion, one of the reasons is because people are now investing all of their emotional energy into romantic relationships, and they think that if that romantic relationship ends, their life ends. It will destroy their entire life. The Prophet Muhammad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِن كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ, and basically it's an ayah that says that if your fathers and your sons and wealth that you've accumulated and so on, it's like a long list, is أَحَبَّ إِلَيْكُمْ, it's more beloved to you than Allah and the Messenger and jihad in his ways, فَتَرَبَّصُوا.
Wow.
So wait until the judgment of Allah comes to you.
Wow.
So in other words, love, if it's directed to Allah and struggling in the path of Allah and these kind of things as the number one, and everything else is secondary. Because remember, it says ahab, it's comparative. It's a comparative word. It's ahab. It's more beloved. It's not saying that you can't love your wives. In fact, the Quran says you should, or that Allah will put that love in your heart.
Yes.
But so long as that love is subdued and is below the love that you have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and jihad for his struggling in his
So the greatest love should be for Allah.
And can that not help you deal with thirst as a man?
Yes.
If you're in a position where you need to pull your attention back from your wife because there's been disrespect or expectations not met, can you not focus more on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than being like, oh, but baby, I just need some of your intimacy.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, to me, it all makes sense. And
It does.
I think it's tricky for young men who have been around so let's say Muslims in the West who've been around this blue pill conditioning and perhaps have very skewed ideas of what relationships should be. I think they need to very consciously study intersexual dynamics and be very clear on what they want in a relationship and also what they're going to give. Because if you get married young with that blue pill conditioning in your mind, that's a tricky one. And I'd say to all the Muslims out there who are getting married, the Muslim men who are getting married early, really pay attention to the guidance about relationships within our faith, because it is there.
Yes.
Superior to the blue pill or to the red pill is the green pill, if we can conceptualize it as such. Modeling your relationships after the Prophet, ﷺ. But also, I would say to a lot of the men in the West, if you have perhaps been infected by this blue pill conditioning, which most
A
have,
lot of them have.
yeah, it's in music, it's in TV, it's everywhere. Look at red pill to understand where things can go wrong, but understand there's no answers there. There's only what the risks.
Yeah.
If you want the answers, again, thankfully our faith has the answers if you focus on the right areas.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good place to maybe
Yeah,
try.
and
Do you want to say something?
yeah, I was gonna say like you're going to be doing this series on an intellectual take of the prophetic story, which you're going to talk about liberalism, ideologies, history, theophilosophy, even gender issues. So he's going to be doing it for the sake of his
Yeah.
So
Now we're going to be going through the Prophet's life, and we want to take everything like intellectual.
all angles.
Yeah.
All angles. It'll be
And
fantastic.
that's something that inshallah you can look forward to in the Sapiens Institute channel. But it's been a pleasure.
I love
Honestly,
it.
I've learned a lot. I've been in your presence, both of you, mashallah. It's been fantastic, obviously, hearing this voice and this experience. Because it's all well and good looking at studies and reading books, but to hear it from somebody who's gone through like as much experience as you have in what you have had experience in is very refreshing, honestly. And people love that. People love that.
And we're here for you. Anything you need, we're at your service. And I just want to say, may Allah preserve you, protect you, grant you and your family the best in this life and the best in life to come.
I'm truly honoured, man. Thank you very
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys.
And on that note, guys, make sure that you like and subscribe. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.